Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to Big Blend Radio's first Friday Toast to the Arts and Park show with Nancy Reed and Lisa Smith, the mother-daughter travel team and publishers of Big Blend Radio Magazine, Radio and TV Magazine, and Parks and Travel Magazine. And of course, you know, we travel full-time on our Love Your Parks tour. And very excited today. You know, our first Friday Toast to the Arts and Park show, we partner with the National Parks Arts Foundation to interview their artists in residence. And this is such a unique organization. What they do is they put artists of all kinds, filmmakers, poets, musicians, you could be a plein air painter, a dancer, but they put artists in residence for 1 full month in a park unit. It's super cool. You could be in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, Dry Tortugas out in Florida, Chaco out in northern New Mexico, or Death Valley. And that's where our guest is today. Today, our guest is world-renowned photographer, videographer, cinematographer, and author Harun Mehmedinovic, and he is the current dark skies photography artist in Death Valley, and he's there for a full month. Right now, it is November 2019, and he's there as part of his Sky Glow project, where it's like a documentary project, and he's filming the night skies of the world. So very excited to have him on the show. Welcome, Harun. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're glad to have you here, and we wish we were in Death Valley with you. I know we were supposed to, but travel plans get crazy sometimes here. Is it true that Death Valley was the first park that kicked off the Sky Glow project?
It was one of the first two because you can say one of the first three because we were escaping out of Los Angeles to try to find some good night skies, and usually the parks are the best place to do it anymore, especially in California. And so we would go and visit like east side of the Joshua Tree National Park, for example, and because the west side is gone because the light pollution of Palm Springs and surrounding areas is so strong that the very west side of Joshua Tree is lost its night skies. And then we would also go to Death Valley, and Death Valley technically, when you look at its north end of the park, because of the elevation and because of the dryness in the air, it's one of the best places on the planet to actually see the night skies. If you're in a particular spot that's far away from the cities, and so that's why we went there, of course, and also Grand Canyon was another one. But yeah, Death Valley was right there from the beginning, just because the proximity to Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know we used to live out in Joshua Tree area in 29 Palms, and the skies were pretty clear. But you know, it's as we travel to parks, I wanted to ask you about this when it comes to light pollution. Something I've noticed as we photograph, you know, even in daylight, I'm starting to see pollution in the sky. Like I'll go look at the photos later and go, it doesn't look so clean anymore. Does that contribute? Is regular pollution contributing to sky pollution, not just, you know, the lights that we have in cities?
Well, the lights go out into the atmosphere, so they need to bounce off of something. So whatever is up there, whether it be humidity or dust or literally anything that may be floating up in the sky, is going to make it, because there's more for the light to reflect off of. So when we use the word sky glow, what that really means is that the light that we have down on the ground, which is usually the biggest culprit, is the badly set up street lighting. That usually goes up into the atmosphere, then bounces off of something and comes back down. And that is that sort of sky glow effect of not being able to see the night skies, that it goes up and it basically drowns it out through that process of going up and then bouncing down off of something. And that something can be literally anything, including the clouds, of course.
It's interesting to me, and I'm so glad you do. We lived in Tucson, and you know what I loved about the area that we lived in, we were right outside Saguaro National Park, and you know it is, you know, we do have a city there, but I mean, because we leave probably, you know, an hour, depending on, you know, where we're going, at least an hour before sunrise. We always want to catch sunrise, and it's so dark, and there was no streetlights really where we were. So you know, you're like, but we're finding that even traveling around some of the smaller communities are seeming to adopt being a dark sky community, which is important. And when you get to a city suddenly, like we just came back through petrified forest, and we went through the whole Shiprock area, Gallup, and all these small towns in Colorado, and drove in at night here in Yuma, Arizona, and I could barely drive with all the lights. I wasn't used to that, boom. Does that happen to you when you're out, in these pristine places, and then all of a sudden you get into like LA and it's like, can you actually, do your eyes adjust to it?
Oh, like one of the best, worst examples of this is actually in Smoky Mountains. Like when you're out in the forest areas, it's very, very dark, because it's just, there isn't lights, but there's a lot of trees, right? So it's blocking any kind of light. But there's like these surrounding cities like Gatlinburg, for example, which is like literally right outside of the park. So you're driving through this really thick, dense forest, then you end up, boom, like in what's like Las Vegas style lighting, like blue and blasting right at you. And that is probably the most sort of abrasive example that I've ever had happen to me, because my eyes were so adjusted to the darkness. I mean, it was actually darker in that forest than it is in most other places, because as I said, the trees block the light, even though the sky quality over that park isn't that great actually, compared to most other parks. Because of the trees, your eyes adjust to like absolute darkness, which is why it's become a firefly habitat, like a firefly reserve. But as soon as you exit, like literally as soon as you exit the park line, you're in one of those few cities, and one of them is the Gatlinburg, is the popular one, or Pigeon Forge is that's where people stay and like sleep when they go to the park. But the lights in it are just like blue lights that are blasting in all directions. They all almost look like the 1950s style, those glowing orbs. And that is by far the most offensive example I've found, because I mean, first of all, it's just glare, and it's really, really annoying when you get out of that forest into that light. It bothers you. But also there's that other layer of it, which is, but this is the common sort of a lack of understanding and care that a lot of these cities have, which is that their park actually is protecting the fireflies, and we've removed like 90% of the firefly habitat. Like we've killed it because we're using the lights in those areas.
Oh.
So fireflies have retreated into what's left of darkness, and they're mostly an Eastern U.S. phenomena. There isn't that many fireflies in the Western U.S. They're not. That's not their traditional habitat. They need wet and dark places, especially forests, and not pine forests, and nothing like at 10,000 elevation. So your whole Colorado is, for most of the part, a lot of it is out. There's only few parts in that part of the U.S. where there used to be any fireflies. So we've killed all those habitats, and now they retreat to what's left of the dark forests. For example, Smoky Mountains is pretty dark in there. And then these surrounding cities, they don't care, like they should be aware that this is an area that's trying to preserve a certain animal and help certain nocturnal animals, yet they don't even bother to like, forget even like trying to control lighting, like getting rid of some of those lights that are excessive, just like at least shield it, but they're not even doing that. And don't make it blue, because it's even worse for those animals, because they're reading it as daylight.
Oh.
Because it's the same color temperature as the sun. So it's like they literally are living in like permanent day to them. They can't tell the difference between the sunlight and our lights. They're just reading it all as that, and because of that, they're actually being like extinct, like being taken out of existence, right? And firefly is one of those animals that is like the bluer that light is, and the brighter it is near their habitat, the more likely they're going to disappear. They're going to try to move to find dark areas, and eventually they'll be gone. So because they can't mate without being in a full darkness. And then many other animals are impacted the same way, like salmon, for example. They did a big study Washington State in the rivers there. They did a study of like, if we were to shine this much light or this much light or even this much light, and then blue light versus red light versus amber light. So they tried all those combinations, and they found that the blue light, even when it wasn't that intense, was the worst for the salmon. And very intense blue light would literally kill their entire hatchery.
Wow. Wow, this is amazing. And I saw, Nancy, I don't know if you've seen fireflies before, but I saw our first one this
was
year.
Louisiana. Yeah.
And no, it was Kentucky. We were in, central Kentucky, and we're staying in this little cabin in historic downtown Springfield. Like, the whole town is dark at 9 o'clock at night. And we're sitting in the back of the cabin. She has this grassy area and a little stream, and all of a sudden I see this thing floating around, and I'm like, is it the wine? Like, I only had like a couple sips, and it turned out there was this firefly, and
So
that
interesting.
has the cabin came out, and she's like, yeah, it's, they're normally gone. It was what, August we were there. They were kind of gone at that time, but he was all on his own, and I'm like, where's your friends, where's your family? But and they're magical, man. That was like super super cool to experience. But I had no idea about the blue light, and I think about those senses, just that jolt suddenly being into, like, I felt like we were on the runway of a war or something when you got into the city. I just think about our as human beings going in and out of parks and into city areas, if it's affecting, assaulting our senses, what it does to these
To
creatures.
animals, yeah.
Yeah. And have you seen any changes in what light pollution can do to plants?
Yeah, they actually, speaking of that, we always like to use studies because, there's one thing is your eyes, and the other thing is here's a science outfit that did an actual study to try to figure out what happens. So in case of actually impact on plants, there's two places which have done some study of this, like in England. There were actually several universities that got together. I think Cambridge was the main sort of party in this study, but they were trying to figure out what light does to trees.
Mm.
And certain kinds of trees in England, they were closer to light versus further light, would actually bloom earlier, or like they would, their leaves would come up earlier and stuff like that. And then the animals would have to, like the insects especially, would have to like hatch earlier. So basically the light throws the entire thing off, for those animals. Like, the entire sort of
The system.
place has to adjust to that light being present. So that was definitely one sort of an example of that. And also there were certain plants that they were testing in, I think, UC Santa Cruz. There's a lab up there which does studies of circadian rhythms, which is basically your body's natural state is to spend a certain amount of its day in perfect nighttime. That's what we have biologically adjusted to. And during that time, we produce certain chemicals, including melatonin, which are needed as a regulatory chemical for the body. It's like a body clock is the circadian rhythm. And it also protects you from certain diseases, and it gives you proper like sleep. It puts you in proper like REM sleep and so on. So what they were trying to test there is, the circadian rhythm is response to light. So basically, even when you're asleep, or any animal or any plant that has that night cycle, what happens is when you shine the blue light at them, they, even when they're asleep, seemingly their body reacts, like their skin reads that light, and it reacts as if the sun is coming up. So even though you're sleeping, certain body functions stop happening. They were supposed to happen at night because the body is telling itself that the light's coming up.
Oh.
So they did a study up there where there were certain plants that they had kind of put out, and they knew these plants had a night cycle. Like a couple of them actually would bloom at night, kind of like the saguaros do. And so what they did is they would use like same thing, but they would use different intensity lights of different colors, and they found again that the blue light, almost of any intensity, was worse than any other ones. And some of those plants would not even open up. Like if you just shine that light at them, they wouldn't even bloom, and then the plant would be dead.
Oh,
Like
no.
it wouldn't. So because it needs to get pollinated, and it needs to propagate,
Right.
like
Wow.
anything else. So that light basically cuts that process of pollination, and eventually that whole plant in that area is gone.
Wow. Wow. I just read a report this morning that about our sleep cycles. And when you have a deep sleep, they're saying now that part of the problem with Alzheimer's is that whole rhythm and what your body does, and how it actually is a very healing thing. But part of the issue with how people get Alzheimer's is because they haven't been sleeping. And if you get disturbed like
Right.
that, it's kind of interesting how it connects to what you're talking about. In coming back to Death Valley, what are some of the places that you go and say, okay, I need to go and film here? Are there special places in the park?
Well, Death Valley is, I think, the second largest national park, if I'm not mistaken, in the country. So by square footage. So there's lots of parts to Death Valley. And the way you look at it from night photography point of view, you always look at it as, because one of the number one most important thing to consider is how much light there is present that's artificial light, so human-made light. And when you look at Death Valley, the south of Death Valley is fairly close. It's about an hour and a half, I believe, or even less from the city limits of Vegas. And
Wow.
on the other side, you also have towns like those smaller towns of
Mm-hmm.
general Los Angeles area. Like the very south would be something like Barstow. But then
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the actual LA and the suburbs of LA light dome, it almost reaches Death Valley. It's that strong.
Wow.
So and that's like 250 miles away, but there's still that light dome exists, and you can see it when you're down in the south of Death Valley and you look towards Vegas. You can kind of see that light stretching out into the atmosphere. It's kind of like a literal dome. So we liken it to a mountain, and in fact, somebody a while ago did a little like computer simulation saying what if light pollution was mountains, but actually it kind of is. Because the stronger that light is, the more it reaches up into the atmosphere. And when you're at a very dark spot looking towards that, you can kind of see it. Like a little town's dome is smaller. And in fact, Tucson did a little interesting test, which very much demonstrated they were
Hmm.
uh, trying to dim their lights. I think they went from like 100% to 50%. Then
Yeah.
eventually they managed to get it down to like 30 or 20%. So as they dimmed it, that light dome that stretches out into the atmosphere would drop by a certain amount. And you
Wow.
could physically like see it. You could see it visually drop down. And they actually did some shots from Whipple Observatory, which is
Mm-hmm.
south of Tucson.
Yeah.
And they were able to get these all sky shots, which showed how that like light dome just drops. And Tucson is even a city that shields its lights. There's cities that
Mm-hmm.
are much worse than Tucson. There's cities like Gatlinburg that don't shield their lights.
Mm.
So you can have a city that's like 1,000 people, but it has worse light pollution than a city of like 100,000 people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Huh, that's amazing. So
if that
just
makes
even
sense,
taking, yeah, they're taking those steps. I mean, that's where we lived in Tucson. We were up, what, northwest, I think was it, and just driving out towards the park to catch a sunrise, it was like you could barely see anything. What's interesting about this dome, and then thinking about this artificial light, I've never done night photography or anything that looks good at all. So I'm looking at both Nancy and I are like in awe of your work. And just going like, okay, from what I've read is a lot of photographers say, okay, you've got to bring light out to photograph the stars. You need some form of light. So
right.
yeah, where does that balance come in? Because it's going to be little compared to what a city or a town is doing, right? Do you use special kind
Well,
of lights?
so basically, let's look at Death Valley just as an example here, because we're talking about Death Valley in general. Part of what I need to do when I go to a park is I have to shoot towards the cities, and you get a sense of how much of that light is present on the horizon of a national park, right? So I don't need to necessarily light paint, right? Which is what you were talking about. Like, if you need to actually use lights in order to get exposures of the foregrounds.
Mm,
Um, so what I've done over the years, like when I started doing night photography, sort of the easy, quick, cheat way of doing this sort of stuff was to bring a light and to shine it just to get a sense of the foreground. But that we've actually sort of over the years moved away from that. What we did do is get lenses which let in a lot of light. They're going to be a little
mm,
more expensive than your typical lenses. So like higher quality lenses, which can open up more, let in more light. That limits how many lenses you could use because there are only so many out there
mm,
that are going to give you that kind of light, like passing through the lens onto the sensor. So we would find like the widest aperture lenses we could get, and eventually when you're exposing it like 20-25 seconds, you start getting the foreground even when there isn't any light present, right? And part
wow.
of that is because starlight, like actual light of the stars coming down onto the surface, especially in the summers where you have like the core of the Milky Way that's high up in the sky, uh, it actually has light coming down, and
Hmm.
we have a hard time registering this light because we need our eyes to adjust. Like some of us may need a couple of hours to fully adjust our eyes to start seeing it. Some of us don't have the vision to see it, but there is actual star the earth. And when you have these lenses that can really open up and let in a lot of light, and then you expose for a while, you can actually get those foregrounds to be lit up without you having to artificially light them. I think what happens with night photography is a lot of photographers out there want to go out and actually do some light painting so they can sort of, it's for an artistic purpose. They're going to get a certain effect, maybe a little stronger lit foreground, or when they need to get certain colors to come out or whatever it is, they may have a need of some sort, artistically speaking, to photograph it. A lot of what we were trying to do is to actually capture things as they are without human interference at the park itself, unless there's a permanent light present, right?
Mm,
Or if there's cars constantly passing by. We were trying to avoid as much as we could shining our own lights. Uh,
mm,
why you
Yeah.
do this is so you can show it to somebody and say, hey, here's a problem because there's all these cars whipping by and that's causing problems here. Or there's like the big dome of
Mm.
the city nearby that's drowning out the sky, so that is causing the main problem. So we were trying to have more sort of clear examples of what are the ever-present issues there, because when you come in and you start lighting your own stuff, you're just doing it for that particular shot, and aesthetically it may look more beautiful or whatever. um, but it's not as useful necessarily sometimes for demonstrative purposes, unless there's some kind of a foreground that's actually more important than the backgrounds. Like I'll give you an example. We were doing some photography of petroglyphs at a couple
mm-hmm,
of places like Volcanoes National Park and up at Volcanic Tablelands, which is next to Bishop, California.
mm,
And when we were trying to do these, we were trying to photograph a Native American or Native Hawaiian, in the other example, uh, uh, actual petroglyphs of the night skies. So they would do 13 moons, the lunar calendar, or they would do something like certain constellations. So we wanted to actually photograph those on those rocks, and therefore needed to add some light in order to be able to see it. So
mm,
that would be an example of where you might want to light paint a little bit in order to be able to see something. But in most of our cases, we've been trying to stay away from using our own lights, and that eventually will become a larger problem in the national parks, as you have photographers going in at night with like huge lights blasting them in all directions.
Mm.
It's actually going to impact the visibility and the enjoyment of everybody else's stargazing
mm,
when they go over there. And a lot of people bring their own telescopes to these places as well, depending on what you're talking about, and they want to be able to actually go there and not have lights shined at them and ruining their vision and stuff like that. So there's a thing like about also respecting other people's space and minimizing the amount of use of your own lights if possible.
mm.
Have you ever had the opportunity to photograph night skies on like a white sand beach? Like I remember when we lived in Kenya, Mombasa, the sand was white, and it would reflect the moonlight, and so it's a whole
Yeah,
different world.
right. White Sands has that
Mm.
effect. When I was at White Sands, there was a little bit of moon up in the sky, but it made the moon look a lot more
Yeah.
than it was because that tiny little bit of the moonlight that would come down would light it up like a Christmas tree on a long exposure.
Hmm.
So yeah, I know that effect for sure. It happens. You have the beaches occasionally. There's actually even rocks that happens at, depending on your location. There's certain rocks that are very reflective or white,
Mm-hmm.
kind of colored and or like slightly off white. And when you shine any bit of light on them, they just like pop.
Mm.
And occasionally that moonlight is so strong coming down onto some of those that they actually look almost like blown out exposures.
Hmm.
Um, when that happens. So, when you're doing night sky photography, you're letting in a lot of light and your sensor is set to very high sensitivity. So any additional light or something, some kind of what appears to be a strong light, maybe not to your eyes, but to the camera, can start looking like too much light, which is
Mm.
Hmm.
also why we avoid shooting during the moon, unless there's a point to shoot during
Oh.
the moon. We don't shoot during the moon. We shoot basically 7 days before or after new moon, and we make
Oh.
sure that the moon is set, so you're getting perfect darkness.
Oh.
Wow.
Wow.
I would
Cool.
have thought the opposite. Yeah,
Yeah, me
exactly.
too.
I mean, I'm even the song we're playing for you is called "Searching for the Moon." Oopsie.
Yeah.
But-
No,
so that's how
no,
you
no.
learn. Yeah.
Yeah, because the whole idea is to get the sky as it appears when it's the darkest, right? Because
Mm,
that's the only way to really judge how much light pollution may be intruding or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because moon is going to light pollute a certain amount. So it basically, when you're doing scientific research in the parks, and there's actually a great outfit within a park system called the Night Sky Division.
mm,
They work out of Fort Collins, and they use these all sky cameras. They look like telescopes, which they take out into these dark places so they can get a full 360-degree dome sky.
Hmm.
And they try to gauge where in the horizon or above the park is there some light present. And when there's moon adds its own layer of light pollution, basically. So what you want to do is you want to gauge how much humans are impacting. So you don't want the moon
Okay.
to come into those readings, right? So the same thing with us with photographs. We try to capture that night sky as best as we can, and the moon is going to be a light polluter, basically. It's a natural light polluter. That's why we
Yeah.
distinguish between natural light and
Mm,
artificial light. So natural light is like the moon, or like a meteor exploding over
right.
you, or like
Yeah.
something like um, uh, the aurora, right? Southern or northern aurora. When it comes up,
Mhm.
it produces a light effect, and it lights up the foreground. It makes the whole exposure look 2 or 3 times brighter, because
Mhm.
it's coming down pretty strong. Of course, it looks green. That light looks green, right? When auroras are happening, but that's a light pollution situation, right? But we try to distinguish it from natural versus artificial. So when we say light pollution, we mean human caused, because there
Right.
is a certain amount of natural, like for example, when you're at Volcanoes National Park, until recently they had that huge eruption. Well, Kilauea was basically erupting continually, and when you're there at night, you see this big blob of light coming from the volcano. Well, when you look at that blob, it's also kind of like a dome, kind of like our city light domes are. It's
Mm.
like a presence of light that's throwing light into the atmosphere. So that's a natural presence, but we try to distinguish something that may be naturally present, because natural presence of light is temporary.
Mm.
Problem with human artificial light is that it's,
Right.
for all intents and purposes, permanent, right? The street lights are on all the time, because in very few places are they like motion triggered where they become temporary.
Oh.
Um, so, so
You
in
know,
other words, yeah, yeah,
humans are very like we know all these things now. We didn't know them when we put up all the street lights. Okay, this is a problem we have. So many things that we do now, we now know are not good for the environment or for us. But
right,
when we put them up and when we initiated all these things that we've done, it was for safety, convenience, mostly the big one. Everything's
right,
a little bit more comfortable and convenient. Some things were done like for safety reasons, probably like street lights would be safety and those kind of things. And once we've done all that and put the money into it and everybody believes in it, it's really difficult when studies come out and go, whoopsie, we made a big mistake yet again, and then trying to convince people to undo the mistakes. And they're like, no, they don't want to know. They just don't want to
I mean,
know.
this is going to sound super insensitive when I say this, but
Uh-oh.
we've tied light pollution to many problems. We've tied it to cancers. We've tied it
Yes,
to insomnia, right?
exactly.
So
Yeah.
there's been over 1,000 studies of what light does to
Mm-hmm.
humans or animals now. So okay, so let me put it this way. I'm going to be very Native American about it, if you will. If you don't correct those issues, you're going to get what you deserve, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
if you cause an imbalance in nature, and nature decides to
Yes.
reach and slap you back real hard, well, then you'll take it, aren't you? Right? So if you're going
Mm-hmm.
to be disrespectful to the other animals and other
Yeah.
beings that live around you, and you consider them as a separate, irrelevant, an
Mm-hmm.
unimportant thing, and it comes back to slap you real hard down to extinction, if we're talking, then you deserve what you got, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you didn't use your faculties, you didn't use your brain to understand that some of these things require not just a response to something that has been screwed up, but also you have to be preemptive about some of these things. You can't just be
Exactly.
responding, right? So in other words, if we can't get it together as humanity to
Mm.
figure this out, then we are going to deserve the consequences, and we should coldly take them.
You
Well, and
know,
it's true, and I think that my personal view on cancer is our reminder of every single thing we did that was against nature.
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And you know, and it's when we talk like this, I know people are like, how could you say this? So and so just died of cancer. Well, I know a lot of my friends have, and it's come, you know, when some of my recently a young friend of mine, she's, you know, my age, she died of cancer up in Napa Valley, and she found out right before she died. Here she was living out in nature in the vineyards. Well, they were spraying the vineyards, and there you go, you know, and yet there were, you know,
Right.
oh, we're organic half the time, not anyway. That's true. What you're doing with Sky Glow, I think, is really important, because you're showing people something out there that half of the time have never seen it. I was very lucky to, Nancy raised me in the bush and, lived in countries where I could see the sky, but you still don't see it. You have to be like almost be trained, and there's something magical
Now
about
you
being
do.
outside, and now it's very hard to find. It's really hard, and you don't know what you're looking at half the time. So it's everybody
Right.
with their cell phones, looking.
Oh, I
Here's all these
know.
nice apps to look at things, but I wonder about cell phones being out in nighttime too. We start to light everything up. Let's just keep it chill and go out. So you're showing people things that they've never seen, but there's this scientific side that is the proof, the evidence, right? You talk about, let's not just be all
Right.
happy, joy, we saw something.
You know what I think about cell phones? I think in the next 5 to 7 years, we're going to have a whole new thing called butt dial cancer.
Right. Right.
You know?
Yeah. No, because we don't understand even what the impacts of that sort of stuff are. But yeah. But as far as light, we do. Right. So light is a lot like global warming. One of those that we have to respond to immediately. It's not. It's not one of those we're going to wait till we find out. There's nothing to wait to find out. It's not very good for you, right? So you need to minimize the use of it, and you have to be careful which kind of light you choose as well, right? So we've found that if all our lights at night happen to be red, well, their impact would be like 10% of what it is right now, literally.
That's funny because I would just because blue's a calm color and red is like a fighting color, you would think that red light would be more harmful than blue light.
No, it wouldn't be, because the body is adjusted to different light spectrums based on the sun. So the closer you are to sun's spectrum, the more disruptive that light is.
Wow.
So if light, that's why when you go to an observatory, all the lights around the observatory are red usually. Or like amber, because they don't mess with your vision. So somebody can shine a red light at you at night when your eyes are adjusted, and they don't need to readjust again.
Really?
Because it doesn't, because when you shine blue light, then you will have to adjust to it, because blue light is, again, it's reading as daytime.
Yeah, it's like going into Walmart. It's the Walmart lighting.
Right.
You go in Walmart, I want to go under a table, but it's true. When you're driving at night, they have those kind of amber tinged street lights in some areas, like some highways, like some you'll be, there's light, but it's that, then I can see and I'm okay. But when it's that big bright light, I'm like, dudes, what are you trying to do? Are we going to beam up now? But Harun, I wanted to ask, going out and filming at night, I'm sure a lot of people wonder, like, oh my gosh, aren't you scared of snakes? And aren't you scared of the boogeyman or whatever? For me, I mean, there's like that magical calm, and I feel more at home outside than inside. And I know I've watched some of your TEDx talks on your, your being raised and going through a lot of, being put, not being able to be free for a while, and due to war. So being outside in nature, and especially at night, is that calming for you?
I always liken it to a kind of meditation, where you can feel like it really sets you in a certain, it gives you a certain perspective, right? It puts you in a certain frame of mind, like where it is very calming, but that's also because I've had that experience as a child of the night sky in a way that a lot of people didn't. So to me, I've always thought of it very fondly, and I wasn't like deathly afraid of night. Ever since I was a kid. I know a lot of people are, so they bring a lot of lights into national parks because they always constantly need everything to be lit, because they're used to that. It's kind of like an addiction. But I can tell you, I've done, I've gone out and shot, I mean, almost 1,000 times at this point, if not more than that, for this project. And Gavin, who I worked with on the project, has also gone out almost as much as I have to shoot at night, and we have never had a bad incident happen to us. Now, there is a distinction to be made, I think, when you're out there as a guy and you show up somewhere that happens to be a white guy, you probably can get away with more. So me and him could get away with a little bit more than, say, if I happen to be, let's just say, African American, and you end up in somebody's backyard out in rural America. Might not be so good for you, right? Like, so that is a very important thing to state.
It's true.
I mean,
it's true.
No, it
Yeah,
is
Otis.
true.
Right.
Otis, a
Unfortunately.
friend of ours. He's been on our show. He's a
Oh.
national park photographer as well. Otis Harville, and he's like he says. Sometimes you go in some areas and you're like, uh-oh, you know.
Mhm.
So he does run into that once in a while. You know,
Yeah.
so it's not
I do
easy.
think it would also be, it could potentially be, I don't know, I can't put a percentage on it, but definitely more dangerous if you're a woman
Mm.
Mm.
to be out in some of these places at night, right? Because the few times that we had close calls or potential issues that would have happened, it wasn't about a bear being there or a snake being
Mm.
there. They generally leave you alone unless you really
Yep.
mess with these
Mhm.
animals. They generally leave you
Mhm.
alone. It's when
Yep.
people show
Mhm.
up and cause
Exactly.
problems, right? And it's most
Yep.
likely going to be some kind of a bullying, muscle, idiot that'll show up somewhere, right?
Yep.
You know, so you will have to have a gun potentially in some of those situations, right?
Well,
So all I'm saying is,
no.
if you're a dude that shows up with a car and you're sitting there in the middle of the night, most likely most people passing by are going to leave you alone because they're more concerned about you
Yeah.
and who you may be than you should be worrying about them. But let's say you're a woman out there in the middle of nowhere and then somebody shows up. That you gotta say is gonna have potentially a bigger percentage possibility of something bad happening.
You know what I
But
do?
with that
We
being
car
No,
said,
camp.
yes,
We car
I,
camp. We
yeah,
car camp,
and
and this is what we do. You sleep with your keys in between your fingers. So if you
yeah,
have to punch someone out, you punch their
you
eyes
got
out.
right,
spikes.
We have a big stick, just like Teddy Roosevelt. And I
Mhm.
mean, and then the other thing, and I keep a wine cork screw. Well, that goes with us everywhere, and
Don't
as
tell
does
all
the
the secrets.
wine. So, like, I always have the corkscrew, one of those little ones, so that you can put that. But see, I don't know. I'm just like, I'll punch someone out with like keys
But you know,
and wine,
I don't
wine
mean to
corks.
interrupt, but I have to say this. We lived in the bush in Kenya for several years,
mhm,
and the fear that we have, or that this country has about each other, is far worse than living in the bush in Africa. I'm sorry, people,
right.
Africa is safer.
Depends.
But I never
Now you're
Well,
had
gonna.
that big fear. I didn't walk around with
right,
weapons in Africa. I really didn't. First of all, I'm not I'm not afraid of the animals. It's always about the people because I know my way around
right.
animals. I know when to approach, when not to, when to lie down on the ground, when to just stop breathing. I know all that stuff. I just know it. But people, they're the threat. And I mean it really, we're scared of each other, and that's why we have weapons.
Yeah, and I gotta say, with all those potential things that could happen out there, I would probably put animal attack percentage to be less than 1% that it could
Mhm.
ever happen.
Absolutely.
Uh, but the thing that, as much as we can contemplate about all the worst things that could happen in the worst ways that can happen, the
Mm-hmm.
chances of any of that happening, even with people
Mhm.
involved in it, is incredibly low. I mean,
Mhm.
Yeah.
low to the point where if we
Mm.
catastrophize about everything and we are worried about the worst case scenarios about everything,
Always.
I don't. It's never going to be a good experience out there,
No.
whether it's daytime or nighttime. If we're going to be terrified constantly of everything,
Then
so
that's when bad
Exactly.
things happen. If you're gonna, I'm sorry, but if you're gonna be a really big pee pants, don't go out.
Nice, Lisa.
I'm just
that's
gonna
true.
no, but it's true because when you have that, there's fear, like fear of heights, and then there's the crazy fear where now you're the paranoia is going to get, and it breeds, and you're going to freak everything out around you, even if you're not yelling and screaming and
Well,
you're freaking out. That stuff I believe that it's like you can overcome fears
mm-hmm.
if you have that attitude. I'm going to overcome a fear, or I just wish more people. And yet at the same time we say this, we promote parks and take everything out of the park, I mean, that you brought in, don't, take things out of parks, don't even take the pine cone, none of that, so we're always trying to
Just
educate on
leave
that.
it.
But the reality is there's a balance that we have to have. Yet I want more people out in the park and in parks, but then I don't. You know what I mean?
Well, you
Uh-oh.
want responsible. You want
Balance.
them to act responsibly and
Right.
safely. I mean, this overriding fear we have of each other and of animals leads to more trauma. Like, for example, when somebody's afraid of something, animals know. They're the first ones
Yeah.
there. They smell it. They're like, "There's a weakling. Let's go get it." So
Yep.
if you're scared, don't go. Just don't go out in the wilderness, especially at night, if it's going to make you even more afraid of all those boogeymans and stuff. Just don't go. You know,
That's true.
because
Yeah.
because you are an unsafe element
Oh,
in the.
Harun is near Beatty, and you're near Old Bodie and Rhyolite, Ghost Town. I mean, do you get scared of ghosts? Like when you go photograph in places like that, I have to bring
No.
pillows. Come on.
Cool.
Yeah. We've never had a ghost encounter
Oh,
in
darn.
all the years. In
Bad.
all the years of shooting around old abandoned structures. So again,
Oh,
the only thing here is people.
Yeah. Wow.
wow.
Well, you've got to have a great time in Death Valley. You're there for a whole month. Is that usual for you to spend a whole month in one park setting?
No, it's not. It's
Oh.
not. I mean, because we with this project, we're lucky if we get 2 or 3 days at a certain place because we've been trying to cover basically every state and every relevant place that we could think of to this question of light pollution, that we just usually weren't able to stay anywhere more than a day or two, which ends making a lot of these trips, because you only have a few days every month to shoot. It ends up making them incredibly hectic, and when you plan to go to a certain place, you may need to drive a lot of hours every day to go place to place, so it's not even uncommon that we have one of those 13, 14 day stretches of a certain month where we're driving 2, 3 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours a day in some cases. So by the time you get to the end of that run, you're trying to hit up as many places as you can, and you're absolutely mentally exhausted, and like the whole idea of going out and shooting becomes a real chore and eventually becomes an uncomfortable experience. That's
Oh.
part of the problems of going and doing projects, is that it becomes work at some point when you're absolutely mentally out of it anymore, because you've been driving so much and you haven't been sleeping very well because you're up all night shooting, so you're getting naps basically, so that eventually can become dangerous, and definitely not very good for your health. So that's why a project like this, you have to be very dedicated over a very long amount of time, because there's so many things that could go wrong with it, and a lot of it's very exhausting, frankly, and often you're going out and hoping everything's going to be good, and then suddenly clouds roll in or something happens that takes away that night, and so on. So it's been a real, I mean, it's been a beautiful experience of going out and seeing these places, and at times it's been incredibly frustrating. And if you're not careful, very dangerous one. And it has nothing to do with people or animals. It has to do with your own mental condition.
Right, right. Yeah, we know from driving, I mean, being on our Love Your Parks tour, we did it 3 years full time, and then we stopped for 3 years because we needed to, because the internet changed and we had to change everything up, all our websites and everything. And then it's like, here we are again. And it's true. I mean, it's like, yeah, let's drive from Kentucky to Colorado in one shot. And next thing you know,
Car camping.
yeah, you're car camping in places, and then you're like, okay, can I really sleep here? And the parking of the car is a whole interesting thing, whether or not it's in nature, or sometimes you need to pull over just because you don't want to crash. But
Right.
I think staying in a park for a full month, like, to me, that would be just like the ultimate way to be able to not just night photography. Are you going to do daylight photography while you're there too?
Over the years, we've shot a lot of Death Valley. So what I've been doing, really, it would maybe a different experience if I was dropped into like Gates of the Arctic or
Yeah.
something, like some extremely remote place where I've never been. But with Death Valley, we've made it a point to document Death Valley as best as we can, because it is the best place, maybe give or take, to document. It's the place of some of the best and at times some of the worst examples of things. And so that's why there's a kind of a laundry list of things that you need to do across different parts of the park, and it'll take you 5-6 hours of driving to reach certain places in the park. So you try to basically make daytime be the time you're getting sleep and getting rest.
Right.
So that's just that. And then you have a kind of a laundry list, and you're trying to check things off as you go in and say, hey, how do you cover a park of this size with this, and especially when it involves hiking or anything of that sort. And it becomes like you have to really plan ahead, and you have to be careful, and you have to be as well rested as you can. So trying to sort of grab as many daytime shots as you're trying to do nighttime shots will eventually probably land you in a hospital.
We don't want that. So
No.
that's why Harun does his interviews at noon, because it sucks to photograph at noon and from a car, because I know you're
Yeah.
in the middle of driving around and doing this. We really appreciate you joining us here on Big Blend
Absolutely.
Radio, and very excited to, follow more of what you're doing with Sky Glow Project, but also you have those, everyone, if you go to bloodhoney.com, that's Harun's website. You can also follow him on Instagram at Sky Glow Project, Twitter at Sky Glow Project. He's on Facebook as well. But don't you have a new book coming out?
Yeah, I do. Besides my night stuff, I do a lot of other stuff. I do nature documentaries a lot. So last thing I did was for HBO, and it's a movie called Ice and Fire. So anybody that has HBO, you can
Yeah. Cool.
look it up. But the other sort of thing I've done over the years is I try to get people to kind of get out of their comfort zone and get out of the cities and do something fun or interesting. So I do a lot of portraiture that I've done over the years. So that ends up being as kind of a separate project, and I have like series of portraiture books that I've put out, and Sky Glow would be an example of just the night sky stuff. And so I try to kind of do a little bit of everything, whatever is a certain interest at any given time.
And the
I
time,
try to follow up on it.
the
So.
time
You have
lapse part is amazing too.
You have a photo that has a woman standing beneath this huge dragon at night.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. Where is that? Where's that dragon?
That's so there's a dark sky city, dark sky community in California called Borrego Springs.
Oh yeah, we
and
still live there.
That?
We still live there,
Yeah.
believe it or
But
not.
where's that dragon? I've
So
never.
so
Oh.
they put all these sculptures. They're kind of like giant sculptures all along the main road in Borrego
Oh.
Yeah.
Springs, and
Yeah.
so you can see them sometimes by just driving through by that main road. You can kind of see them on the side of the road, but many of them you have to kind of get a little off road to reach them. But they're all in what's called, I think, Goleta Heights or something,
Yeah.
or I think that's what it's called. The area, it's called Goleta, and up and down those dirt roads, there's I think 150 sculptures in different places, and there are things like giant dragons or like T-Rexes or
Awesome. I gotta
actually
go.
camels, and yeah. So actually, because that community is a dark sky community, it's a pretty good spot in the general LA area to go shoot at night, because it's being shielded by the Anza Borrego Mountains there, the Anza Borrego Park. So it's a good spot to go to do night shooting, and it's become overrun by night photographers. So you'll find it probably a frustrating experience to try to take shots there anymore. But people go there also because they have those amazing, crazy, not just stars, but these crazy sculptures too. So.
And the Badlands, man, the Badlands are incredible. It's Borrego Springs. We haven't been there for a few years, but it's we ended up living there because we lived in the mountains in Julian, and then we went through too many fires and really had to leave, and so we did. But we lived out there for 6 months before we moved out to Joshua Tree area, and it's a magical little place, and all those sculptures have been going and going, but it's magical to be out there at night. We used to just go, I mean, it's a 600,000 acre park, and we used to just go and sleep out on the dirt, and just because you can. It's one of those rare parks that you can just go out and do that. But again, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, you can learn more about Death Valley. Go to nps.gov/DEVA. So DEVA, there you are. And also keep up with the National Parks Arts Foundation. They have these amazing programs. As you can tell, to stay in a park for a full month is just a really unique opportunity. So go to nationalparksartsfoundation.org. And I encourage you to follow them on social media and get their newsletter so that you can keep up to date with the different residencies, because they come and go real fast. And we always love to play music for our guests. And like I said, we're going to play Searching for the Moon, even though you don't want to film under it. This is by Yagull. You can keep up with them at yagull.com, and it's from their album Una. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.